There are a few people that we have had the opportunity to talk to. I think there's different folks that mean a lot to all of us who do the Retro WDW podcast. The next person who we're bringing up is somebody that was kind of on my dream bucket list, because as a graphic designer, not to gush, but I think this guy was actually one of my biggest inspirations as I was going through high school and trying to figure out my career and what I wanted to do. And so when Brian called me when I was cleaning the bathroom and said, "We got him," that was a big moment for me. So please welcome to the stage, Mr. Norm Inouye. So we're going to do a little bit of This Is Your Life this morning. Thanks to the archives available at different schools, I was able to find actually Norm's yearbook from college, from his first college in Oregon. And
Utah.
I was sorry, Utah. And here he is, editor-in-chief of the yearbook that year. And you're going to that school. There was somebody that told you about another school that might be good for you to check out, right?
I had an art instructor who had attended Art Center. I don't think he graduated, but he attended, so he knew of it, and he told me to, if I was interested, to look into it. So I did. I sent it in a portfolio, and amazingly got accepted into the Art Center. So after I graduated from Weber State, I went to the Art Center.
Right, and so that's here, and actually I think that's one of your instructors there.
John Coleman.
On the left-hand side.
Amazing, I remembered.
So Norm graduated in 1968, and here's his graduation announcement. Now, in your last year, you were actually under a scholarship, right?
Yes. I didn't start off as a scholarship, but after, I think it was 4 or 5 semesters, it's an 8-semester program, I applied for a Ford Motor Scholarship, and I received it. So the last 3 or 4 semesters, I had a Ford Scholarship, yes.
Yeah, and then when it came time for portfolio reviews to get jobs, there were a few companies that looked at your work and thought that, oh, okay, this could be the right person.
Yeah, I guess back then, I don't know whether they'd still do it now, but corporations used to come to the Art Center interviewing prospective graduates, and we were all interviewed, and several of us got job offers. So because I had the Ford Scholarship, they sort of had the first right of refusal, so I couldn't show my portfolio to anybody until after they saw it. But luckily, they were one of the early ones, so I got to show it and didn't offer me a job. So then I got the interview with a few other places, and I got a job interview with GM, and they offered me a job, and Hewlett Packard actually offered me a job too. But John Coleman, who you saw, he was one of our instructors. He told us that if you ever get a chance to go east to work. So Michigan for me was east. So that's where we went.
So when Norm showed up, this is what the Firebird logo looked like upon his arrival. And after he started working there was a radical transformation, I think much to the better, during that time. So do you want to talk just a little bit briefly about your work at GM on that particular project?
Well, yeah, so I think at the time, I started there in 1968, and they were coming out with a new Firebird. They had the Firebird existed, but they were coming out with a brand new body style in late 70. They call it 70 and a half. And they thought the old Firebird, they called it looked like a dead bird. So they wanted something more contemporary to go with the new body style. So this is actually something that I think I showed you before. I had done a logo prior to that on I guess they called it a Firebird of the Future, and that was sort of a precursor to that logo, which eventually became the big logo on the hood.
Yeah, so Norm left, in what year did you leave, Jim?
72.
72, but his design was then picked up and modified and became one of the most, I think, iconic pieces of design in the 1970s in both pop culture and car culture. So Norm is the reason that Smokey and the Bandit ended up being, I think, as popular as it was.
I think originally the Bill Mitchell, who was the head of styling at GM, hated the idea. I think they were doing a mock-up in a paint shop that were going to show to him, and he went down to the paint shop and saw it, and he just hated it. And so he went up and read the riot act to the head of the Pontiac. So it kind of got killed. So when I left in 72, it hadn't happened yet. And and when we were home, I guess toward the end of 72, 73, I was looking at a Road and Track magazine, and there it was. It was an ad for this 73 Trans Am, and I think the thing that made it was the movie that sort of made it a cult thing after, after
Absolutely.
the movie came out.
So after GM, he worked at a few other places, and then he heard about a project, and that interested him very greatly. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Disney and what piqued your interest in that.
Well, I have a friend. She is, I'm pretty sure, I think the great niece of Walt Disney, and she told me there's a company called WED Enterprises, which was a division of Walt Disney Company, that were looking for designers to work on Tokyo Disneyland project. And I always loved Disney, and I told you before, I'm of Japanese heritage, so I thought, well, this would be a great chance to not only work for Disney, but maybe get an opportunity to go to Japan, because I'd never been at that time. So I came to interview, and the interviewer told me, yes, in fact, they were hiring for Tokyo Disneyland, but there was this other little project that was happening before called Epcot Center. So they wanted to hire me to work on that. And after that was finished, then I could transfer over to the TDL project. But by the time we finished Epcot, Tokyo Disneyland was only roughly 6 months behind in opening, so all the creative development work was already finished. So I really didn't get to work on anything. I did get to design a trash can for Tokyo Disneyland. That was it. I never made it to Japan.
Well, we're so glad that he did actually work on Epcot, because here's a picture of him at his desk, and you can kind of see the tools that he had to work with. This was before computers. So there were pens and pencils and triangles and T-squares and circle templates. Such a different world from today. But if you look at his desk, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And all of this stuff is going to come into play with the work that he did. So we're going to go forward, but take a minute and look at it, because you're going to recognize all these things as we go forward. And there's, I think, a real big surprise hiding in there for everyone. So your first project was to do the pavilion logos.
Yes, and when I started in 79, and Epcot was opening in 82, so we only had 3 years basically to design and build this whole project. So everybody who got hired on, most all of us got hired on about the same time. We all sort of hit the ground running. And one of the first projects was they wanted to come up with logos for all of the pavilions. And what was it, World of Motion?
Oh yeah, World of Motion,
was up first, so then we would start working on the logo. And I think none of us, including John Hench and Marty Sklar, who were the head of the design group, had any idea what we were going to do with it. So I remember the first several phases we went through for the design of the logo. They had, I think it was called Edie's conference room, I believe. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I kind of wallpapered the wall with hundreds of just different ideas, for anything from like chicken scratching to I remember lightning bolts and wagon wheels, trying to depict graphically some kind of a world of motion, I guess. And because I had no idea, and I think at that time they probably didn't have any idea what. But as we went through the process, it finally, basically came down to they wanted a graphic image that would tell a story, and yet just be a symbol. So anyway, we went through it, and this is what we finally came up with for transportation.
Yeah. So this, I think the brilliance of all these logos are the simplicity and the fact that you can read these in a second and a half and know exactly what's going on. So this looks like a sphere, and you can see like wind resistance working against it. So it's to me that to be able to capture the idea of motion in just one simple graphic like that blows my mind. This one is Spaceship Earth.
Spaceship Earth, and that was actually one of the last ones. I think that at one point, because Spaceship Earth was such a iconic building, that there was some thought that maybe they didn't need a logo at all. And so that was like one of the, in fact, it was probably the last one, except the Epcot logo was actually the very last one I did. But we finally decided that since they all had one, that they needed one too.
I love this thing of the Earth obviously hurtling through space, and again, to just be able to boil that down to one graphic just blows my mind. The land
again was, it's just a way to depict land.
Yeah. Yeah, and the plant with the biospheres that they had in the back, just again brilliant, simple. Horizons.
Horizon, yeah. Vision into the horizon, or a road or a path.
Yeah. Now here's the one that I think we're going to bust a myth today.
Yeah.
Because I think everybody assumed this was a camera iris because of Kodak, but in fact,
this was probably in retrospect, was probably the most difficult and probably the least successful of all logos, because it was meant to be a vortex. It was supposed to look like it was spinning into wherever space. I think if I had to do it over again, I'd add more perspective to it or something, because I think because Kodak was the sponsor, everybody assumed it was the iris of a camera, but it wasn't.
Yeah. Communicore, and there's a hidden thing in here that never occurred to me until Norm told me, and I was like, oh, how did I never see that?
Originally, the Communicore, this actually is kind of the basic plan of the building, and also it was a C and a reverse C Communicore.
See? Never, it's been there all this time, and we just never figured it out. And once you know it, it seems so obvious. There's so many good ones. This is one of my favorites, Energy.
Energy was actually, because the building itself, as you recall, it had solar panels, which at that time was a relatively new thing, and obviously it was energy developed from the sun, so the sun was the obvious choice to make a logo out of.
And then this was kind of the late guy, Living Seas.
Seas was pretty one of the easy ones. Waves, water, wave, colors, yeah.
So all of these logos were then used throughout the parks on wayfinding systems and signs within. And the applications that you did for them were all very different and very unique. Like the signs in World of Motion were recessed with like a reflective coating behind it, so there was some dimension to that. That one on the land, probably, I don't know if anyone remembers, it was about 12 or 14 feet high and made out of wood, like dimensional and attached to the wall and then backlit. So the way that these logos were utilized throughout the parks were just phenomenal. And I do want to mention one thing real quick, because Deborah Lord's World Bold, I think, was a huge part of the design system. And as I was talking to Norm, I found out there was actually kind of a shootout amongst the designers in WED to come up with a font for Epcot.
Yeah, we all decided, because Epcot was special, that we wanted to have its own special typeface as well. So there was a number of us, Debbie and myself and a couple other people, we all made an attempt to come up with an alphabet for Epcot. and Debbie's was chosen, which she did a great job, and we used it for all of the signage in Future World. And what we did is we released the font to a couple of the type houses locally, and we're able to get all of our type from them, and it was exclusive. So we heard later there was people who were trying to specify it, but it wasn't allowed.
Such good stuff. So once all of those logos were done, as Norm said, then it was time to kind of turn attention to the main Epcot logo. And before his arrival, there were some attempts as Epcot kind of developed. So it started out as just World Showcase, and then Future World. They were two separate areas. And then famously, the models were kind of shoved together. But there's a story that you told me about this version of the logo and Card Walker not being a humongous fan of it.
Yeah, the particular Epcot Center logo type was, and the logo actually, that had all existed before I arrived. I think it was all done actually here in Florida, I think. I don't know, but anyway, it existed, and he didn't like it at all. He eliminated the D with the character in it, but I'm not sure, and I'm probably wrong, but I think Walt was using the Epcot logos during his presentation on his Sunday night shows, I think, but I'm not sure. But I know it did exist before I arrived.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of like D style things during I think there was even a Disney magazine from the 60s that kind of used that. So I think I heard he said it looked like a stop sign. So Norm started on the process of working out what exactly could this new Epcot logo be. And this was something that was on your drawing board. And I thought this was fascinating because it's starting to see the prototype of the idea here of like how you can combine, what is Epcot? It was Disney and business and nations kind of put together. And that evolved into more of what we know today. And with a little extra, it turned into the logo that we're all familiar with. But what I didn't realize is that there was a reason behind all of the rings.
Yeah, when I designed it, then I came up with the idea of the 5 rings representing 5 different things that came together and formed Epcot Center. But Marty Sklar didn't like it. It was too technical explanation. So I've seen it and read it many times, but he came. Oh, there it is.
There we go.
He came up with the description as it was an Epcot flower, and was much more romantic than mine.
But still, I think as a designer, it's like we always talk about. Design is problem solving. It's not just, it's not fine artist. So the thought process behind it, I think, is really key for people to understand like why that logo exists. Because now you actually know the secret of like why are there 5 rings, and the fact that each of them represents something to me just shows you the thought that this gentleman has put behind everything that he's done, and like how that impacts the final piece. And that logo really became synonymous with the park. It was utilized all over merchandise. I mean, that was, to me, one of the biggest things. The fact that you could buy T-shirts and earrings and tie clips and everything with that logo on it. And then over the course of time, it's even been beloved by fans. Like, people are tattooing themselves with your logos, Norm, for real. Like, people are making this part of their life.
Amazing to me.
Nuts. Now, here comes our super secret. So you were working on a project with John Hench, and you were in his office, and he kind of made an offhanded comment about Spaceship Earth and how he felt like there was something sort of missing.
Yeah, I was presenting, I think, some operational graphics for the main entrance to Epcot Center, and John almost offhandedly said, "We need something at the entrance of Epcot Center, because the building itself is so huge. You admire it well from a distance, but when you're up close, it's so gigantic you never can see the whole thing at once. So we need to have something that's more of a human scale. Something of a human scale at the entrance. And so, again, it was almost an offhand comment, but he said he thought we need some kind of a graphic or something at the front entrance. So I started working on at first some signage and directional signage and some just graphic elements, but none of that made any sense. So then I thought, well, how about a fountain? Because there was a fountain. They were talking about a fountain, but it was. But I thought it has to be more than a fountain. We have to do something with the fountain. So I came up with the idea of, at the original one, they had 9 pylons, and they were going to be crystal glass. And the 8 of them represented the 8 opening day pavilions, and the single one in the middle with the Epcot Center one. But as it turned out, the glass was too expensive, also too heavy, and it was just way too expensive to do. So then I sort of boiled it down to the 3 remaining and changed it to acrylic, which look a lot like glass. And they bought off on that, and it sort of became the icon at the entrance. And I was told that it's at one point that it might have been the most photographed place in all of Epcot, because everybody needed a picture of it going in and coming out of Epcot Center.
Yeah, and there's in the model, that's a close-up of the Epcot model, and there is the version with the 9 pylons on the left. So you can see the different colors there of the different different pavilion logos with the main Epcot in the center. You got to squint because it's tough, but that's the one. And it sort of became a symbol even within Imagineering of the achievement of Epcot Center too. This was a poster that was put out internally. And
it was kind of an in-house joke, but they used to. This was even before the fountain came. They used to talk about the Spaceship Earth as the golf ball. So the fountain became the tee for the golf ball.
Oh, that's so good. So there's Card Walker with the fountain, and he's got something there. And Norm kind of surprised me with the story of a plane trip with this thing. So
we were going to for the dedication of the opening of Epcot Center. Card Walker was on the podium, and he was going to read this description of the dedication of the Epcot Center, but the plaque had not been finished yet. So since we were going, when we finally had it finished, they said, "Take it with you." So I had it in the seat next to me on the plane, flying it to Florida, and we got it there the night before opening, so that Card had it on his podium to reread the next morning.
And so that's why that version of we'll find out. That version of the plaque is in the archives now. The plaque was eventually set into acrylic, much like the pylons. And you told me that there was a problem with brass, right?
Yeah, you couldn't integrate it with the acrylic because of the expansion and contraction. And when they heated it up, they would because the brass would expand different than the acrylic, and it would crack it. So instead of doing that, they embedded it, but it didn't. With the Florida weather, it just didn't last. I think that thing lasted maybe a year. Then they took it down.
So cool. So besides the graphics for the pavilion, Norm also worked on a number of posters, and including this one, which one of the most iconic images. And this was a teaser, right?
This was like a preview poster of the coming attraction of Epcot Center, and it was just to try to do something mysterious, I guess, and using Spaceship Earth as the object, I guess. And I didn't illustrate it. There was an illustrator named Ren Wicks. I did the design work, but he actually did the illustration. And the image itself got used many times for different things, but the original poster was just this introduction, coming attraction of Epcot Center.
And so it got reused for a poster for Spaceship Earth. One of the few posters that was actually in the park when it opened up. I think this and Impressions de France got one, but there were very few attraction posters at Epcot, unlike Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom. So it was used there. And then Norm also did a number of other posters for Epcot as well.
I did very little work in World Showcase, but World Showcase in the Japan, China, and Mexico pavilion, they had museums. So for their various museum shows, I produced posters and catalogs, and these were a few from, I think, China and Japan.
Yeah. This one, I remember this particular exhibit vividly in the mid-1980s. Just this gorgeous exhibit with fighting kites and all kinds of different kites from Japan. I was a teenager, just was walking through there, mesmerized by that stuff. And then one other thing that you actually did get to work on for Tokyo Disneyland was a poster for Magic Journeys when it came to Tokyo.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to see from this image, but it was a 3D movie, and there was a scene in there where they're flying a kite on the beach, and you could the kite itself appeared to come out of the screen. So the poster, the kite itself is actually a three-dimensional. It's not part of the poster; it's a separate piece. Difficult to tell there, but that's what that was.
Yeah, so such a neat solution. That poster did eventually get partially reused. They took the good stuff for the Disneyland version, and when they moved it to Fantasyland and in the Magic Kingdom here in Florida, and then they added a bunch of other stuff on top of it to make it much less good, I think. But be that as it may, Norm did the good part. And then in the mid-1980s, as the Eisner regime took over, there was an ask to sort of redesign all of the corporate identity for Disney, and that went through literally every division. So Norm got to work on the work for WED as it transformed.
Yeah, actually, I think Michael Eisner and Frank Wells came to Disney after Epcot Center. One of the first things Michael wanted to do was to create a corporate identity for the entire company, and he wanted each of the division to have some representation by Mickey. And I happened to be working, in fact, I had finished the new design for the WED logo, and we were getting ready to change over all of our stationery and things, but then when Michael showed up, he wanted to redo the whole thing. So then I transitioned into he changed the name from WED Enterprises to Walt Disney Imagineering. That's where that change happened. And so I came up with the idea of using the sorcerer from Fantasia, because WED at the time was always known as the sort of mysterious division of Disney that created all the magic for the parks. So I think it was natural for him to be the representative for us, and I made him into a magician with a wand, and above his head there's pixie dust and stars, and if you see there's one single four-pointed star. That was sort of my homage to the old WED logo, which had the four-pointed star in the middle of the D. It since has changed. I think they've changed the WED logo, or WDI logo.
What's interesting, though, I was looking at, so they just rebranded again, I think last year, and I noticed there's a bunch of stars on it, and they're all four-pointed stars.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knew that, or I think I told it to Marty, and he thought, oh, that's a great idea, because it's just some little leftover from the old logo.
Right. So time marched on, and Epcot changed into the 90s. Maybe not as good as it was before. But as we saw a couple of years ago at D23, New Hope was reborn, and we saw Norm's logos being brought back with new ones for the new pavilions. And in fact, yesterday, 2 days ago, they opened up the Connections Cafe at Epcot, and his logo is all over the place in there, embedded in glass and in the walls. So it's like the earth is healing, things are coming back again the way that they were. And even the fountain is back. Yeah. Norm's fountain has returned at long last.
Amazing.
So it took, 40 some odd years, but it all came around again.
That's why I say everything that's old becomes new again.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Norm Inouye.